So in this video we are going to talk about post-colonialism. I have already given the brief introduction about post-colonialism. So in this video we will not be talking about just the introduction. We'll talk about the important events and another start points. Post-colonial is referred to as the Third World Literature Studies and Commonwealth Literature also. These writings, when we talk about post-colonial literature, these writings refer to the literature before and after the domination of the colonized countries. When we talk about the Third World Studies, this term was coined by Alfred Sauvy. To be colonized is to be removed from history. This expression is also another definition of post-colonialism, and this expression or this definition was given by Walter Rodney. So he says that if you are colonized, then this also means that you are removed from the history, because obviously now the colonizer is going to write everything from his perspective. So you automatically get removed from the history. You have no say at all. Who knows your truth? So we should be wary of all these things. Then we have Albert Memmi. Albert Memmi claimed that the most serious blow suffered by the colonized is being removed from history. Borrowing Walter Rodney's expression or word to explain or define the situation of the colonized. Who among the following comprises the Holy Trinity in the context of post-colonialism? If this question is asked, Holy Trinity means in respect with post-colonialism: Gayatri Spivak, Homi Bhabha, Edward Said. We need not mention or we need not forget their important contribution in the post-colonial literature, and we all know pretty much about Gayatri Spivak, Homi Bhabha and Edward Said. Edward Said's Orientalism was published in the year 1978. The African writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o was also a Marxist cultural critic. So when we talk about the post-colonial literature, we talk about the African writings, we talk about Ngugi wa Thiong'o and others. We do talk about Marxist cultural critic and the relationship between all these. Frantz Fanon wrote two important books which talk about post-colonialism at length. The first one, namely, is Black Skin, White Mask. Black Skin, White Mask. The second one, The Wretched of the Earth. Black Skin was published in 1952 and The Wretched of the Earth was published in 1961. Another important work which we all have heard before several times, The Empire Writes Back. The Empire Writes Back got published in 1989 and it was written by Bill Ashcroft, Gareth Griffith, Helen Tiffin. So Bill Ashcroft, Gareth Griffith, Helen Tiffin writes The Empire Writes Back. Edward Said is strictly a post-colonial critic. Homi Bhabha and Gayatri Spivak are strictly post-colonial critics, but Frantz Fanon is not just a post-colonial critic. His form, he talks about the structural, his contribution through his theory help us understand the writing basically. but he is important, but he is not strictly a post-colonial critic. Then we have another work by Edward Said, Culture and Imperialism it is, 1993. Culture and Imperialism got published in 1993. Homi K. Bhabha wrote The Location of Culture in 1944. Important works. The Concept of Unhomeliness. And this unhomeliness means double consciousness by some critics. Even Orhan Pamuk talks about this thing. But the concept of unhomeliness or double consciousness by some critics means neither the culture of the colonizer nor that of the colonized feels like home. So neither you feel your culture is yours, nor you feel the colonizer's culture is yours. So that is unhomeliness. And this term was given by Homi K. Bhabha. He talks about the third space. We have all read about Homi K. Bhabha and his theories in detail at great length. But these are the important questions that we should remember. Hybridity, the concept of hybridity or the term was coined by Homi K. Bhabha. What does this mean? The two cultures mingle, co-mingle, the nature and the characteristic of the newly created culture changes, and each of the cultures causing ambivalence. This process is called hybridity, right? Frank's concept of white mask. What does this mean? The blacks try to look like the whites. So simple, right? When we try to imitate the whites because we want to become more white, this is also a hint of inferiority complex where you want to imitate like somebody. A negative connotation. Okay, but what is good should be adopted. But white mask is when you want to act like somebody, the white people. Orhan Pamuk also talks about this. He's the contemporary writer, and he talks about this kind of masking in one of his work, where, if I can give an example which he talks about, you want to make your living space, your home, also look like the white people. Whether it is your living room, whether we talk about the objects that symbolize some kind of westernization or white masking, TV, sofa, they're placing the decoration, etc. Okay, what according to Frantz Fanon is neo-colonialism? Ruled by native elites. So when the native elites, they rule you, that is the neo-colonialism. Neo means pseudo. So you are colonized by somebody who is white, you understand it as colonialism. But neo-colonialism is when your people, but they are native, but they are elite, and they try to colonize you. That becomes the neo-colonialism. So this is called a double colonization. That is, first you are colonized by the colonizers, then by the native neo-colonizers. So that's how the hierarchy flows, right? Okay, what according to Frantz Fanon is neo-colonialism? That is the rule by native elites. The essay of mimicry and man, the ambivalence of the colonial discourse. Who writes this? Homi K. Bhabha, right? This is one of the important and famous popular works by Homi K. Bhabha, of Mimicry and Man. Who originated the term subaltern? Antonio Gramsci. Subaltern term is originated by Antonio Gramsci. When you read feminism and you talk about Gayatri Spivak and other writers, there also you learn the same thing. Subalternism. Antonio Gramsci. Who founded the Subaltern Studies Group? Ranajit Guha. Okay. So who is the member of Subaltern Studies Group? Partha Chatterjee, Subaltern Group. Gayatri Spivak, Subaltern Group. Dipesh Chakrabarti, Subaltern Group. Homi K. Bhabha is not a Subaltern Group strict member. Is not the member of this group. Okay, what is the term negritude associated with? Or what do you understand by the concept of negritude? What is negritude? First, it is coined by Aime Saussure, and it is associated with the concept of the blacks. Negritude means, in Saussure's words, if we have to explain it, it is simple recognition of the fact that one is black. That's why you say Negroes, right? The acceptance of this fact and of our destiny, that somebody is black, of our history and culture. Then you have Grandma Turner. Turner argues that novels are of specific value to post-colonial studies, right? So those who are typically coming from literature, they understand the sentence. The rationale he offers for this argument is novels are of specific value to post-colonial studies because stories and novels are generated by culture. Where they come from? They come from culture. They are influenced from the culture. They therefore produce meanings and significances that are indicative of the culture. Right? Fair enough? Now let's talk about the world traveling. What is world traveling? It is a post-colonial methodology. Why do you call it? World traveling is a post-colonial methodology, and this is associated with the group called feminist scholars with Latin American backgrounds. Homi K. Bhabha is a post-colonial scholar. I don't think you have a problem with this argument. But he argues that colonial discourse was ambivalent about the colonized. How? Because he argues, or he says, portrayal of the colonized is towards either a passive and conquerable subject or an irrational, untamed barbarian. This means that the colonized subject becomes constantly stereotyped. So somebody who is colonized is a subject and they becomes constantly stereotyped. For example, the Asian colonized, the Irish colonized, you find there are constant stereotypes created, recreated, edited in so many forms. So Homi K. Bhabha is also trying to say that. Then we have an anthropologist, and the socio-cultural anthropologist is Arjun Appadurai, and he writes about 5 types of global cultural flows. So there are 5 types of global cultural flows according to him, Arjun Appadurai. What are they? So he says first is ethnoscape. Ethnoscape is one type of global cultural flow. He says that there can be 5 types of global cultural flows. So the first one is ethnoscape according to him. Second is mediascape according to him. The third is the technoscape. Then obviously financescape. And last is the ideoscape. Now we talk about the post-colonial spelled without a hyphen. We keep talking about this thing, post-colonial with hyphen, without hyphen. What does this mean? So when you write post-colonial without hyphen, this suggests that the entire world is now in the post-colonial era. The entire world is in the post-colonial era. It functions as a historical category. Criticism leveled against the post-colonial studies include that the theory entered international relations too recently to be considered an academic theory. So when you say this is very recent, or this criticism can be leveled against post-colonial study, this means that this has just entered the international relations and it is too recent to consider it as an academic theory. For example, there are many in the past you have studied, right? But a recent development which has just entered and you try to make it as an academic theory. So line of discrimination is thin. Then there is Edward Said's work, Orientalism, a very famous work. We all know about this work. He argues that Orient is one term, right? And he says that an Orient is portrayed in Western novels, media and artwork as. So if you talk about an Orient, this Orient is portrayed in the Western novels, in the media and in the artwork as somebody who is lost in the past, somebody who is prone to despotic rule and is plagued by odd cultural tradition. Now this holds truth, this remark holds truth. Sometimes this is imposed, sometimes this holds truth because the construction is such that, right? And the conditioning is such that. The next is, what do you understand by dissemination? So what is dissemination? Dissemination is a term which means that when people with hybrid identities and cultures become diasporic, traveling physically from south to north to live, that is called dissemination. So this term is a scientific term. So you know what is the dissemination? A movement from one direction to another. In literature, this is applied to the process of hybridity. So one who is of hybrid identity goes south to north for the survival or to live. So that becomes the process of dissemination. Okay. Then we have imagined communities. Imagined community is a concept and it is propounded by Benedict Anderson. Do you understand? Benedict Anderson is very important and this term is also very important, imagined community. So this is propounded by him and it means that a nation is a community Socially constructed. Nation is itself a community. The English, the Americans, the Indians, the Irish. So nation is in itself the Turkish. They are a nation is in itself a community. And this community is obviously socially constructed. It is imagined by people who perceives themselves as a part of a group. So you say, I am an Indian, I'm an American, I'm an English, I'm a Turkish, right? And it was propounded by Anderson in 1983. Then we have the written, again another work by Homi K. Bhabha in 1985. This work comes out, Science Taken for Wonders, colon, Questions of Ambivalence and Authority under a Tree Outside Delhi, 1817. Next we have the white man's burden. Who has not heard of this concept of the white man's burden? Everyone has heard. So what is, who talks about the white man's burden? Rudyard Kipling first uses this term, the white man's burden. Then we have a journal. The name of the journal is Tricontinental. This journal was launched by Robert Young, and this journal comes out in 1966. This is important from post-colonial point of view because this is a founding moment of the post-colonial theory. Got it? Then we have Gayatri Spivak's another important work, A Critique of Post-Colonial Reason. This work comes in 1999. Henry Louis Gates, he writes one work, and his book's name is Figures in Black, colon, Words, comma, Signs and the Racial Self. And this was written by Henry Louis Gates. The name of the book is important, Figures in Black, colon, Words, Signs and the Racial Self. The title is itself explanatory, is itself suggesting the post-colonialism. Then we have Henry Louis Gates' another work, The Signifying Monkey, colon, A Theory of African American Literary Criticism. So if you're talking about the African American literary criticism, The Signifying Monkey, Henry Louis Gates' another work. Again, these titles are suggestive. Then we have Gayatri Spivak's another work, which gets published in 1990, The Postcolonial Critic, Decolonizing the Mind, an important work that was published in 1986. You have to decolonize the mind, decolonizing the mind. Who writes it? Ngugi wa Thiong'o, an African writer, right? A black African writer, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, writes this work that you have to decolonize the mind first, and then you can think about anything else. The next is Frantz Fanon's work, The Literature of Combat. Frantz Fanon, I want to give you a little description of Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon has used this term in his book, The Literature of Combat, The Wretched of the Earth, 1963, in which he speaks of national literature, a literature which takes up and explores themes that are nationalist. This is called the literature of combat because it calls on the whole people to fight for the existence of existence as a nation. Edward Said's Beginnings, his another work, Edward Said's work, Beginnings, was published in 1975. Soon we'll be completing this audio on post-colonialism, just a few more points and then we'll be done. Beginnings was published by Edward Said in 1975. The term mimicry is associated with Homi K. Bhabha. Then we have another work by Homi K. Bhabha, The World, the Text and the Critic. Black Literature and Literary Theory came out in 1984 and it is written by Henry Louis Gates. Homecoming, Ngugi wa Thiong'o wrote this work in 1972. It got published. Who argued that African writer can only be written in African languages? When you write and read the feminist literature, there also this is emphasized and explained in detail. Ngugi wa Thiong'o says this: which African writer bade farewell to the English language as a vehicle for any of my writings? Ngugi wa Thiong'o says that if I have to talk about myself, then the medium has to be my language. So she bade farewell to English language. She said, I'm not going to talk about my story in English language as a vehicle for any of my writings. Then we have Past the Last Post, theorizing post-colonialism and postmodernism. Who writes this? Two writers, Ian Adam and Helen Tiffin, published this critical theory in 1990. This is very important. Then we have Edward Said. He says that texts are worldly to some degree. They are events, and even when they appear to deny it, they have nevertheless a part of the social world, human life, and of course historical moments in which they are located and interpreted. When Edward Said approaches to Orientalism, he also says that Orientalism is an Eurocentric style based on binary notions of Orient and Occident. So he explains the entire Orientalism with the help of the binary notion of Orient and Occident. Another important African writer or post-colonial African writer is Wole Soyinka, and he writes a work by the title Myth, Literature and the African World. This is an important work and it got published in the year 1976. He is also a Nigerian and he is also the first African writer to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. Last but not the least, cornerstone of post-colonial canon is Orientalism. Who among the following said that the Edward Said's Orientalism inaugurated the post-colonial field? Homi K. Bhabha. The main figures and the key terms, it's a quick recap of post-colonialism now. Main figures, key terms associated with the post-colonial discourse. Edward Said, Orientalism. Gayatri Spivak and Vanajit Guha, Subaltern Studies. John Mohammed, Minority Discourse. Barbara Harlow, Resistance Literature. Tiffin Ashcroft and Griffith, The Empire Writes Back. Peter Nazareth, Frederick Jameson, The George and Google Berger, Third World Literature. Homi K. Bhabha, Hybridity, Mimicry, Ambivalence, Civility. This is the quick recap, the writers and the terms associated. For any query, you can contact me. My number is 876442995. Thank you.